I think over the years, looking back with hindsight, I can tell you that I was motivated and paralyzed by fear, and that's what took a long time for the early records to get finished. I remember when we finished Pretty Hate Machine 300 years ago, went on tour, and getting that first bit of reaction from crowds and immediate gratification, and it felt so good, and it was so interesting, and it felt like you were changing the world, and you were, a bunch of guys in a van seeing the country and the world for the first time. And the last thing I wanted to do at that point was to hide back in my room or go in a studio and try to mine my brain for new ideas. And so I put the process off, and that took time. And I think after the Downward Spiral, everything was kind of crazy in my life, and it really felt daunting to attempt to go in and write new music. And I was filled with doubt and fear, and time ticked on, and you play these games with yourself about the whole writing process. And in the last few years, I've really come to grip with that, and I'm not nearly as afraid, and I've learned to actually enjoy it. I would say enjoy it again, but I don't know if I ever really enjoyed the process of writing, and being in the studio was always so terrifying and so much pressure. Lately, I've really come to enjoy it, and I found that the process is fun. The act of creating is fun, and it's rewarding, and it's not nearly as frightening as it used to be. And it's not to say that I don't create bad things here and there, but the processes I'm much more comfortable with. And that's one aspect of getting older, I think, or maturing, that I don't mind. And I think that's also very obvious with the fact this record exists, and it exists in such a short amount of time. These songs came out quickly, and they weren't toiled with, and they weren't toiled over, and we didn't overly think anything. And it's also the culmination of a good team of trusted people and people I respect working together with a kind of synergy that really allowed this thing to come to life without any part of it being a fight. And it was a great, rewarding process to be a part of. Over the last few years, I've had a string of projects that have kind of run into each other, really trying to take advantage of feeling creative. And when I finished With Teeth, went right into a long tour. On the tour, I wrote most of Year Zero, and I was also working with Saul Williams on his record. We finished Year Zero, the end of January of 2007, went on tour for the most of that year. Got off tour in the middle of the year, finished Saul's record, and I forget what happened after that. Went back on tour, and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, last fall, 2007, found myself really wanting to try something different. In the scope of Nine Inch Nails, I've attempted to make it broad enough that I've never felt the need to do a solo record. I've never felt that Nine Inch Nails, to this point, has been narrow enough in scope that I would want to kill it off and move on to something else. That's either a testament to it being pretty broad or me being pretty limited in my scope. But the idea of this record was just to try something that wasn't burdened with lyrics and wasn't burdened with structure and wasn't burdened with anything that needed to fit any format. And it was really liberating and fun. And I've titled this record Ghosts 1 through 4, each one being a 9-song chunk. And I definitely see more chunks, probably under the Ghosts moniker, coming in the future when the time is right, or when there's a lull in the action, or when it feels like the right thing to do. The idea really came about last fall. I was thinking about what it felt like being free from a record label, finally, and kind of in between major projects. And I realized when I went in the studio or sat down at an instrument, and if I didn't think about it and was just daydreaming, music started to flow out. And it came out very effortless and kind of formless. But it was fun to do, and it got me thinking it might be interesting to do a record where I never put the editorial brain, never switched that brain on, and let these ideas just kind of turn into whatever they turn into. So I kind of set up some parameters to work within, and I gave myself 10 weeks. I teamed up with my partner Atticus Ross, who I'd worked with in the last few records, and we just kind of went into a room and decided whatever came out at the other end we were going to release, and that could be one song or it could be whatever happened. And that's something I feel I wouldn't have been as comfortable trying to pull off on a major label. I mean, mainly because they wouldn't know what to do with it depending on what it is. And it just felt like something I wanted to do because it felt exciting and different and kind of fun. So we went to work, and much to our surprise, we wound up with 36 tracks, all instrumental, and it became basically soundtracks to daydreams. You know, I found that if I just let myself go and pictured something in my head, stuff just started to happen. I mean, I tinkered around with this idea on the Fragile album in a kind of much more lush setting. And this time around, I just really wanted to experiment with different sounds and textures and feelings, really in a kind of impressionist way, and see what happened. And it was probably the most fun I've had in the studio for a long time. There was no agonizing over content or direction, and it removed the whole process of trying to shape the music into pop song structure. And it really was a real collaboration where I would just play a lot of source material, and Atticus shaped it into whatever it got shaped into. I had Alessandro Cortini play on some things. Adrian Belew came by and played on some things. Brian Viglione from the Dresden Dolls came by and played on a few tracks, and it just became a fun collaboration that was very low pressure and ended up being fun. Alan Moulder came in at the end and applied his genius mixing and engineering, and we wound up with something that we're all very proud of and kind of stunned that we did so much in so little time. The process of creating this music was basically to pick up an instrument. Sometimes it was piano, sometimes it was whatever might be around the studio, ranging from some exotic Indian instruments to guitar to some electronics of various types, and just seeing what comes out. We were heavily influenced, and we referenced quite often some works that had been important to us over the years, like Eno's ambient music series, Aphex Twin ambient record #2 that they put out, Eno and David Byrne's Life in the Bush of Ghosts, My Life in the Bush of Ghosts. Things in texture, even to Tom Waits, the sonic textures of some recent Tom Waits, Bone Machine, for example, were just things that we wanted to kind of delve into. A marriage between organic and electronic with probably more of a leaning towards beauty than the typical Nine Inch Nails release. We allowed ourselves to get quiet and, dare I say, pretty at times. And it was interesting to do that. It was nice not having to fit a message or a climax or structure into anything. And really just to work in a kind of palette, a blank palette where we could do whatever we wanted. Rewarding experience.